Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. Hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. If you are tuning in on YouTube and you do want to chat along, head on over to behance.net/Adobe Live. Big hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening to Jason and Laura and Cody, Umacorn, Masayu, great to see you all, Katarina, awesome. Definitely let me know where you're tuning in from. I love seeing where people are all over the world. Alrighty, so Masterclass number 74. We are inching closer and closer to the big 100. When would that be? Like 26 weeks, something like that? Almost there. 2022 is going to be the year we get to 100. Hey, Faisal and Barbara from Nashville, Jason from Australia. Oh, it's Saturday in Australia. Lucky you, Jason. Leslie from Trinidad. Awesome. I love all these places I want to go to. Even Nashville. I haven't even been there yet. One day I'll make it out to all these places, especially Australia. Got some big spiders over there, I heard, but you know. Drew from Illinois. Great to see you, Drew. Nyasha from Cape Town, Chris from Colorado, awesome. Alrighty, so Masterclass number 74, and today we are going to be getting our virtual workout on, and we're going to be designing and prototyping this experience here. I did post this to Twitter a little bit earlier today, and it's just a lot of fun, right? Just adding videos and Lottie animations to your prototypes really just brings it to life even more. We're probably not going to get to that transition you just saw. Let's play it one more time. The transition from web to mobile. I will get to that probably in a separate video, but we'll see. We'll see how much time we have. All right, Rebecca, great to see you from London. I have been to London. And Diane from London, Ontario. All the Londons are here. I have been to both of those places. Love London, England, one of my favorite places. Darnell from Kuwait, and awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into XD, and I will remind you all that these masterclasses go a little bit deeper into Adobe XD and design. If you do want to learn some of the basics, we are running our daily creative challenges just about every day, Monday to Friday. We also have our Learn Center, where we have a fantastic series by Danny Beaumont. Definitely want to check that out. And I have some videos on YouTube that also go a little bit deeper. So if anyone has questions throughout this stream, definitely throw them in the chat. I will be paying attention. All right, let's go ahead and begin. Because we're going to be starting off with the web experience, we want to start with a web-based artboard, and that could be 1920 by 1080, 1366, 1280 by 1280 by 800 if you're on, a laptop, or 1280 by 720 if you're on a desktop. But let's go ahead and start with 1920 by 1080. We're going to start nice and large. And here we go. So let me go ahead and just name this. I'll just name this Home. Very original, right? All right. How are we all doing in Bangladesh? Great to see you from, a few people from Bangladesh. Awesome. We've got David from Pittsburgh. This is great. People from all over the place. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start a little bit basic on this particular artboard. And currently the artboard is set to white. And it's probably fine, right? But I like to just add a little bit of color in there. So if we're going for a darker feel, which we're not in this case, but if we are, instead of going pure black, I sometimes just like to add a little bit of color in there. It makes such a minor difference, but it also makes such a big difference, right? No, the pure black and then black, or, a little bit of blue in there. But in this case, we're going for a lighter experience. So instead of a pure white, we're going to go just add a little bit of blue in there. Now, you don't want to go too much, because then it looks a little bit too blue, and then it starts to make adding content a little bit more difficult. So ever so slight, right? So there's the off-white, and then there's the white, right? Off-white, white. And I would argue maybe pull this back even more, but let's start here and we'll see what that looks like. All right, artboard is looking pretty good. And now we're going to start laying out some content, and we can start with the navigation bar at the top. So what we're going to do is we might want to start with some sort of a logo. And there are a few ways we can get logos or icons into Adobe XD. One of the ways is to use a plugin, and I do have the Icons for Design plugin installed, one of my favorite plugins, and you can look up something like running possibly, and look at that. We already have a little running icon. There we go. You can also use an icon set. So for example, I have Nucleo, which is a third-party icon manager, and I use that to organize and store my icon sets. And I've gotten a bunch of icon sets over the years. I've noticed the latest update to Nucleo loads a little bit slower. I'm not sure if it's because it hasn't optimized for the new M1 Max, but a little bit slow. But anyways, you can look up, again, something like running, and look, it's almost, is it the same icon? It is the same icon. It's pulling from the same library. So I have the Font Awesome 6 library here, and they do also provide some icons in the Icons for Design library, which is amazing. Katarina is saying, I have a big question, all in caps. Why should I start with XD? I'm thinking about it, but what UX/UI design offer? That is a big question, Katarina. Probably, much bigger question than I can answer here. But I mean, it really comes down to what you want to do. A lot of people are using XD and similar applications for web design, app design, but a lot of people also use it for marketing materials and email design. And, I use it to create animations and characters and things like that. If you go to my Dribbble account, dribbble.com/Pinsky, I have all sorts of things that were created in XD, not just, what it's typically used for, like web and app design, all sorts of different things. But maybe people in chat can chime in and let Katarina know what they use it for. And maybe that might help a little bit. Maybe I'll make a video one day on, what exactly it can be used for. All right, Nucleo looks a bit different. Yeah, this is Nucleo 3, I believe. And I think it's still in beta, possibly. But I'm not sure. All right, now these icons in particular. Now this one here that I brought in from the plugin, the Icons for Design plugin, it's one solid path, right? So you can take a look at that inside of the Layers panel. But what I might want, if I go ahead and actually grab the one from my library, that's a very large icon, right? This one, I believe, is broken. No, this one is one path, but this one here, I think, possibly, if I'm not mistaken. This is broken into two pieces, so the head is one piece and the body is another piece. But what I might want is, just to give it a little bit of style, I might want the leg that's kind of separated to be, a little bit detached. And Drew is saying, use XD yesterday to create animated video intro slides. So Drew actually posted a few things on Twitter using the prototyping hack that I uploaded. You can do some pretty interesting things if you kind of get creative with your prototypes. And a lot of people are trying in presentations. Yes, I don't use PowerPoint or Keynote anymore. I'm losing track. I'm going to take like 4 hours to make this icon. So yeah, what I want is the leg to be a bit of a different color, just to give it a bit of style. So I'm actually going to duplicate this. And on one of them, I'm just going to delete a few of these points, like that. And on this one, I'm going to delete the leg. A little bit morbid, but it'll work. There we go. And now what I can do is I can just shift the color, because these are all vector-based. And perfect. We now have our icon. And very similar to what I was talking about earlier about shifting the colors just a little bit, is instead of this pure black, I might want to just bring this up a little bit and add a little bit of blue in there. It just softens it out just a touch, right? So again, here's the pure black, and then the slightly off black, which with a little bit of blue in it. Looks kind of fun. Logo. And then maybe right beside this, I may want a bit of a word mark, just in case someone doesn't really know what this particular icon is referring to. So with the text tool, shortcut key T, I'll just type out something like workout. We'll keep it nice and simple, just like that. And then maybe for the typeface, there's a lot of different directions we can go, but maybe something like Museo is interesting. It's a bit of a serif typeface, but they also have Museo Sans, and they also have Museo Sans Rounded, which kind of looks fun. And then I can bump up the weight a little bit, maybe to 1000. And I'm going to, oops, did I undo? Yes, I did. Oh no, I didn't. I'm good. sample this color. And as I'm going through this process, what I should be doing is actually adding these colors to my document assets. That way, later on in the future, if I do want to tweak this particular color just a little bit, I simply have to right click, press edit, and then make those changes, right? There we go. And what I might also want to do is very similar to the icon where I have the body and the leg as different colors. I might want to just select out and maybe just shift that color as well. And I'll add this to my document assets as well. I thought you were going to animate this icon, Cornell's saying. Oh, it's an interesting idea. Possible, maybe. If we have time, we might explore that a little bit. You know what I might want? I might want to just tweak this color a little bit. And that, again, that's the benefit of using document assets. There we go. All right, so that's looking pretty good. I'm going to move this into this folder, and I'm going to take a quick look at the preview at the top. It could work. I don't want the logo too large because then it's a little bit overpowering. But I'll just bump up the size of the text just a touch, and that should work. All right, workout. That was an unintended pun and not a very good one. Anyways, so now what I want to do is right in the middle, we want to put a little bit of our navigation. So this might contain things like home, maybe live classes, on demand, profile, etc., right? So sticking with the same sort of typeface, grabbing my text tool one more time, we're going to start with home. Now for this one, I'm going to switch over to the darker color just for now. We may change that up a little bit, and I'm going to drop the weight as well to maybe either 900, possibly even 700. No, I think 900 could work. Let's go back to 900 over here on the right side. I think it's a little bit too large for navigation, so let's drop it down to about 18. That could work. Now, in terms of the actual text links inside of this navigation, there are a few ways we can add additional ones. One of the ways is we can use a repeat grid. And a lot of people, when they're designing navigation bars like this, they go straight to repeat grid. And they will drag out a few like this, space them out, and then they'll dive in and start adding the second one. Now here's the problem with using a repeat grid. The cells are fixed in size. So if I were to start typing something like live classes, if I can spell properly, right? It doesn't automatically adjust based on what's inside of that cell. And of course, if I increase the spacing, then we have a lot more spacing over to the left. So for a text-based navigation, what I would suggest is either manually duplicating them or using stacks. So I have this one text layer selected. I'm going to place this into a group. So Command and Control G, and I'll just call this nav at the top in my layers panel. Now, the group is created. What I want to do is over within my properties inspector to the right, I'm going to turn a stack on right over here. And it's going to define it as a horizontal stack because there's only one object. If there were multiple objects, it would define it whichever direction those objects are laid out. Now I can dive in and duplicate, and duplicate, and duplicate, right? Command and Control D. And it's going to automatically pop another one over to the right. So far, it looks very similar to a repeat grid, right? If I hold down Shift, I can adjust the spacing all at once. Let's go for, I don't know, maybe 56, something like that. We'll see what that looks like. But the big benefit of using a stack in this situation is you might remember previously, the text layer, when I was typing in the repeat grid, nothing automatically adjusted. But in this case, if I dive in and type out live classes, it automatically adjusts. So that's one of the main benefits. On demand, and then maybe this will be profile, for example, right? Another benefit of using stacks is that you can dive in and rearrange these objects. So either within the layers panel or directly on canvas, I can just kind of shift these around if I wanted to rearrange them. All right, looking pretty good. Now, what I want to do is, because this particular screen is for home, I might want to indicate that this is the home screen. And there are many ways to go about this. We can, put a active indicator at the bottom, something like a line like this, right? We can do that. We can adjust the weights of these particular text layers. So the ones that are not active, we can drop it down to maybe 500, something, in that range. Doesn't look too bad. Or we can continue to pull in from what we did earlier with our logo here, is we can change the color. So again, this is the home screen. So I'm going to switch over to my document assets and boop, just like that. Very simple change, but it works. I think that could work. Very good. All right, I'm going to just snap this into place. And then finally, before we get to some of the bigger content at the bottom, we may want a section over to the right that just contains maybe a profile photo, the time, and maybe the date. Because right now, this page is looking a little bit unbalanced. We have a logo on the left, we have some navigation links in the center, but nothing really on the right. So what I'm going to do is with the ellipse tool, shortcut key E, I'm going to drag out a circle. And what I might want is to make sure that everything is spaced properly. So on this side here, if I select the logo and I hold down my Alt or Option key and hover, 87 pixels from the left. It's a terrible number. It should be not 87. Let's go for 88, just to round it up and keep it nice and fancy. This is 99. Now it's 88. Now what we can also do, if you had a little bit more time to set things up, is either drag out some guides and snap them into place. Move that over to this side. Or if you have your artboard selected, you can actually enable either a layout grid or a square grid right down at the bottom of the properties inspector. So I can enable a layout grid, add some columns, adjust the gutter width, column size, all that fun stuff. You can even change the color of your columns as well if you wanted to, but we'll save that for another day. Everyone's talking about hot pink. Yes, I love that color. It's just a fancy color. It's not red, it's not pink, it's kind of in between. I don't know what it's called. Is there a name for that? I don't know, but it's quite nice. All right, so I have my circle in place, and inside of this, we might want an image. A lot of different ways you can get images into XD, including dragging them in from Finder or Explorer. Now I do have a Creative Cloud library set up with toy faces, and I think Cody will probably post a link to toy faces in the chat. I'm gonna drag one directly in. There's the Howard toy face. You can also use a plugin like UI Faces as well to add some avatars in there. And Yasmin is saying, any advice? I'm working nicely with Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop, but I want to learn about UI and UX. So this is a great place to start. Also our daily creative challenges, which run Monday to Friday, I think at 2 o'clock Pacific time, I believe. That's a really great place to start if you're just getting started. But the cool thing is you can actually open your Illustrator and Photoshop files directly in Adobe XD and continue working on them and, take advantage of things like, fuchsia. Yes, that's probably it. Pinsky pink. It's got to be the official one. But yeah, you can open those files directly in XD and take advantage of things like repeat grid, stacks, so on and so forth. But there's a lot of tutorials and courses online that can definitely get you going. And there's a bunch from Adobe MAX as well that are now available. I believe Fergie, Rebecca in the chat, also has a session or two from Max. All right, and then let's see, what day is it? It's Friday, obviously. November 19th. All right, and I'll drop that down a little bit. Maybe I'll change the color a touch. All right. Ooh, that's a little bit small. Boop, boop. That could do. Not loving it completely. I think I might want to bump this up a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm going to bump it up just a touch. Whoops, one password. Nope, don't want that. All right, we are looking good. So I'm going to just group these 3 elements, and I'll just call this profile. And now we have our navigation, we have our profile, and we have our logo looking pretty good, right? So what we want to do now is we want to start blocking out some of the content that's going to go down below. And in particular, this is going to house our video that's going to automatically play when the artboard is loading. And this is where things are going to start getting quite exciting. Oh, look at that. So Rebecca's saying my session was on how to bring Photoshop documents into XD. The stars have aligned, Yasmin. So that's a great session. Rebecca, if you want to link that, I think that would be super beneficial to some people in the chat. All right. So I'm going to start by grabbing my rectangle tool, and you're noticing over here to the left, as I move it, those smart guides are letting me know that it's now perfectly aligned with the logo as well. Of course, I can turn my guides back on, Command and Control apostrophe, and I'm drag it all the way across. Now, I don't want it to go all the way down because I do want some additional content down here at the bottom. So I'll stop it right about here. We can always adjust this a little bit later on. And to give it a little bit of style, I might want to round out the corners just a touch. So at the top right-hand corner, left-hand corner, any of the corners, you can just pull on this little handle and it's going to round out these corners a little bit. Maybe about 16 pixels, looks pretty good. I'll change this so we can see it. That's quite, I mean, it's not too bad. You probably don't want to go much more than that. So if you go like 32, probably a little bit too much unless you're really trying to get stylistic. 8 could also work if you're going for a more subtle look, which isn't bad. Thank you, Rebecca. I have to go back and watch a bunch of Max sessions. I have been slacking lately. All right, so we have our container, and we want to use this container to bring in our video. Now, traditionally, what we would probably do is we would hop over to Finder, for example, and we would grab an image like, I don't know, this one here, and boop, pop it into place. And we can double click, we can move it around, and it looks pretty good, right? But when we launch the preview, everything's very static, and we want to really start bringing motion into these prototypes. So undoing this, I have these videos down here at the bottom, which I grabbed from Adobe stock and converted into MP4s so that we can bring them directly into XD. And just like we can with images, boop, you can just drag it right in, right? And you can double click to access the object mask and move it a little bit. Just like that. And also, when you have a video selected, as I do here in the Layers panel, over to the right within the Properties Inspector, we can control how this video plays back. So in this case, we want it to play back automatically when the artboard loads, so I'll select that. And then inside of the heads-up display or the HUD, we can also choose to loop the video. You can also trim the video and turn the audio on or off and preview the video here. But now if I press play at the top, we have our little running animation, which looks amazing. And once it gets to the end, it automatically loops. But we're obviously noticing a little bit of a problem. Because this video is 16 by 9, and we have a much narrower container that we're working with, we kind of we're missing some of this character's legs, right? We want to kind of show all of that. Otherwise, the user who might be viewing this might not even know what's going on. So what we can do here, there are a few things. One, the obvious answer is just to move that down, right? But now we're taking up more real estate, which we don't want to do. Now, if we were to select the video and bring it on in, like that, now we have all this space over to the left and right, which kind of needs to be filled in. So what do? One thing we can do is we can actually recreate, because this particular video is fairly simple, we can recreate what we see over here, right? You can do that inside of a video editing application or directly in XD. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just grab a rectangle. Let's draw this out down here. And I want to match this color as close as possible, right? So if I go ahead and sample this blue, it doesn't look too bad, but it also doesn't really look great. So what I would do is kind of get a little bit creative with gradients. Now because the gradient is going to help blend the video and the still image, the blue over to the right, I want to extend this out a little bit. And what this is going to allow me to do is switch over to, let's say, a linear gradient. Let's go left to right. And on the right side, I'm going to just select one of these colors. And on the left side, I want to match it as close as possible right? But I want to take this opacity and bring it all the way down. Now, of course, because we have it from the far left to the far right, we're seeing a little bit of that transition, but if I add a point right over here and bring this up to 100%, and then just experiment with the color, now we have a nice transition, right? And I can do the exact same thing down here at the bottom for the floor, which is a little bit of a different color. So maybe we'll bump this up a little bit, right? And then this color here, we might drop a touch, maybe add a little bit of more blue in there. And there we go. Yeah, I don't love that. I certainly don't like that. Let's make it a little bit less drastic. Something like, let's see what that looks like. Still not loving it. Daryl's asking who made that animation. So I licensed this one from Adobe stock. I don't remember the creator's name, but if you look up like running cartoon animation in the video section, you'll probably be able to find it. All right, that could do. Again, it's not perfect. That's not bad though. It blends it quite nicely, right? All right, so now, because we have, a very similar section over to the left-hand side, I can actually dive in here, select these, duplicate them over. I'm gonna flip them horizontally. And, right off the bat, it looks pretty good. We might not have to do anything. Now, it is naturally a little bit darker on the left side, right? So what we might want to do is just mix it up a little bit and maybe add a little bit more blue in here and in the second one as well. And then on the far left, we might want to darken that as well like that. And then we'll do the same thing down here. Add a little bit of blue and then blue. Perfect. All right, so one more time, let's go ahead and launch the preview. And now we're able to see everything in that narrower viewport. Is it possible to make it myself? Possibly. This was probably made using something like either Blender or 3ds Max, Maya. There's a bunch of different 3D applications. I would have no idea, even though I went to college for 3D design and animation. That was a long time ago. I would have no idea where to start with something like this. But there are a lot of 3D animators in the community that might be able to help out a little bit. All right, so we have our running animation looking pretty good. And now what we want is over to the left-hand side, we might want to indicate what exactly this section is for. So in this case, it might be to highlight that there's a live session going on right now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with, I'm gonna name this video. We're gonna start with the text, and I'm gonna type out something like afternoon. Make that nice and large. And maybe to give it a little bit of a different style from everything else is I'm going to switch the typeface to something like Aurea Ultra. And they have a nice italic style that I can use here. And then down below, I'll do something like Cardio, right? Let's left align it and pop this right about here. Gives it a fun style. It's sometimes a nice idea to mix up your headers from all the other typefaces. So, the regular typefaces we're using Museo Sans rounded, and we're probably going to continue. We're going to continue that, throughout the rest of the application. Now, in some of the body text, we might kind of pull it back and go for just Museo Sans and not the rounded one, because it might be a little bit smaller and difficult to read. But for headers and call-out areas like this, could be fun to mix things up, add a serif typeface or something a little bit more bold or italic, something like that, right? So we've got that looking pretty good. And then below, we might want to start adding in some additional information that kind of explains what this is. And, with our larger, more stylized text up here, we'll probably want to bring that back and revert to the, Museo Sans rounded down here at the bottom. So we'll do something like with, what did I just do? I missed it. With Blake Legman. And you're probably going to notice, if I make this a little bit smaller and then I launch the preview, you can kind of read it right down there, right? That subtitle. But as you shrink down your stylized text layers, they become a lot harder to read, which is why, reverting back to something like Museo Sans Rounded, maybe I'll bump up the weight a little bit to, let's say, 900. Maybe width, I'll just drop it down to about 500, right? It just makes it a little bit easier to read. And in this section here, you can definitely experiment with different colors if you don't want the entire block pure white. So maybe we might want to go for a darker blue, possibly. You probably don't want to go too much in the gray area, especially with the background as blue. So maybe something like this. Right in that area there should work. And then what we could do right down below is maybe add another block of text that explains what this session is. So with the text tool, instead of simply clicking, I'm going to click and drag to define the width. And I might want to snap it to the end of the header at the top. And then we can start typing out like something like, hop on your treadmill. There we go, something like that. Now, for this particular text layer, we probably want to make a few changes. One, we might want to drop the size a little bit, not just to squeeze everything into 2 lines, but also just to, separate it from everything else above it. And then I'm going to change the text back to white, and possibly, I think 900, or in some cases this would be considered heavy or black. I might want to drop it to maybe 700. And I might even also want to bump up the line height, just so it's not too squishy. There's a lot of laughing in the chat. What did I miss? Adobe stock? I missed something. I don't know what I missed. Someone will fill me in. All right. That could potentially work. I think 900 is not too bad. It does look a little bit squishy. I can also increase the character spacing just so it's not too overdone, which looks okay. All right. And then finally, right below this, we might also want to include some buttons. Maybe one button to actually start the session, and then one to maybe quickly either preview what it's going to look like or view the exercise list that's part of the session, something to that effect, right? So starting off with the rectangle tool, I'm going to draw one out. I'm not too concerned about the size at the moment because we will be using padding and possibly even stacks to adjust this button. I'm going to round up the corners. And this one's going to be the primary call to action, which is to actually start the session. So I'm going to keep the color at a solid white and maybe just give it a little bit of style. Probably not necessary, but maybe, is add a bit of a drop shadow. I'm going to bump it down a little bit. I'm going to make sure it's nice and blurred. We'll see what that looks like. I am working zoomed in right now, so I don't know exactly what's going to look like, but we'll see. And then I'm going to add a little bit of blue to the shadow, just so it's not super harsh. It's okay. It's not great, but it'll do. All right. Adobe stock, hashtag Adobe stock trending #1. Adobe stock is it actually trending? Interesting. All right. Now, inside of this button, we want our primary call to action, plus possibly an icon. So let's go for something like, can't see it, white on white, not a good idea. So I typed out, let's go, right? And in terms of the color, what I can do is maybe sample one of the blues in the background, just so we have a nice cohesive look. And then over to the left of this text layer, we might want a very simple play button. So with the polygon tool, shortcut key Y, I'm going to drag one out. I'm going to rotate it. Maybe I'll round out the corners just a little bit. Sample the same blue. And there we go. Now, obviously, this button's not looking great. There's a few things we're going to change. One, I'm going to drop the weight a little bit, maybe to about 700 possibly. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to bring this back in a little bit. Let's see what 900 looks like again. It's okay. It's not looking great, but I think it definitely needs some padding. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select the text layer, the background, and our little play button. I'm going to place all of these into a group, Command and Control G, and call this button. Now from here we have a few options. We can either leave it as is as a group and turn stacks and padding on, or we can convert this into a component. Now, thinking that we might have different variations of this is a web experience, so we may have a hover state possibly. I think a component might be our best bet. So over within the Properties Inspector to the right, I am going to press the plus button to create a component. You can also do that with the Command or Control K shortcut or directly inside of your document assets. And then what I want to do is I want to turn not just padding on, because we do have multiple objects. I want to turn stacks on, which is also going to turn padding on. And it's also going to define the stack as horizontal. Friendly blue cardio. I might shift this color a little bit to make it a little bit brighter or something like that. We'll see. But what I want to do is adjust the padding a little bit. So I might want maybe a little bit more space on top. And then make sure that the left and right is the same. And make sure this is still rounded. All right, it's not bad. It's looking a little bit better with the extra padding. So I think that could potentially work. And I might want to maybe adjust the stack size, just bring this in a little bit. All right, we're gonna leave it at that. I can definitely sit here and play and adjust, tweak buttons for hours. But now that we have our primary button in place, we also want a secondary button, and this might help us, create the view exercises or preview the class button as well. So back within the Properties Inspector to the right, I'm going to press the plus button one more time, and then I'm going to create a new state. And this is going to be secondary. You can call it outline. You can call it all sorts of different things. Drew is asking, are there any plans for improving state management with the Lottie files hack? My component states are getting a bit out of control. Short answer is yes. The long answer is there's a lot in the works. And I'll leave it up to the product managers to discuss that more on Twitter, because I sometimes don't have all the information. Definitely don't want to pass on anything that might be incorrect. But yes, there are a lot in the works for components and states. All right, so I've gone ahead and created my secondary state. And because this will be mostly outline, I'm going to just dive in, turn off the fill, set a border color, bump up the size a little bit, grab the text, and view. There we go. And this one might say something like view exercises. And in terms of the icon, let me actually switch to Nucleo for a moment. And let's find a list icon. There's a lot of different list icons. This one could work. Now, one thing you're definitely going to notice is because these icons that I'm copying from Nucleo are 512 pixels, and we have a stack enabled on this particular button, we're about to see some explosion. So definitely keep that in mind if you are, doing things like this. It definitely, causes some problems if you're copying and pasting very large elements into a smaller button. So what I'm going to do, just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to paste it outside. Shrink it on down a touch. There we go. And then copy this again and go into the component and paste it. Now, another thing you can do in these situations, if you know that some of the icons or images that you're going to be bringing in are a lot larger, is just create like a container, like a rectangle, and then drag and drop the icons directly in. So if I do something like this, right? I believe I can pop it into place. That's a lot easier, right? Much easier. All right. I'm not loving that icon. I don't know if it's too small or too big, or I don't know what it is. But we'll leave it as that for now. But we've gone ahead and created our two states. We have our default state, which is our primary button, and we have our secondary state, which is our secondary button or our outline button. And now I can just very easily duplicate this over to the right and switch over to our secondary state. All right. I do think that the 900 for the weight is still looking a little bit too bulky for these buttons. Now the nice thing is, because we're using components and we have a state as our secondary button, if I dive into our main component, which is the one with the solid green diamond, and I edit the text layer in the default state, it'll push those changes not just to the instances of that default state, but also all the additional states where it has not been overridden, which is great. So if I drop this to like 100, don't suggest that, but if I do that, it's going to make that change everywhere, right? Let's try 700 again. I think that could potentially work. And maybe I'll just increase the spacing just a little bit. All right. And even though these two buttons have a stack enabled, we can also place both of these buttons into another group, call it buttons, and then turn a stack on this overall group. And this will allow us to adjust not just the spacing in between these two buttons, but like I showed earlier with the navigation bars, we can easily just swap the position of these. Or if we decide to add another button, it automatically splits, which is great. Alrighty, so this is looking pretty good. I'm gonna group this information, just call this info, and move it on up a little bit. I think it might be looking a little bit too small. I would probably enlarge the entire group a little bit and make all the, oh, thank you, Chris. Yes, you are absolutely right. So what Chris was pointing out is in my primary button where it says let's go, the L is capitalized, the G is not. But in the secondary button, it's more of like a title case. So to make my life a little bit easier, just in case I did, on all the buttons, if I had many instances and it was very inconsistent like it is now, is within the properties inspector, I can actually switch over to title case. So it'll make that change everywhere, which is wonderful. Thank you, Chris. All right. Yeah, so again, I would probably argue that this whole section should be a little bit larger just so it's a bit more visible, but we're gonna stick with that and see how things go. Now, I do want to fill out this section at the bottom, but seeing we have about 10, 13 minutes left, something like that, I also want to create the area where if you click on View Exercises, this guy right over here, it's going to slide out this section on the right-hand side or somewhere else, and it's going to show essentially, a list of some of the exercises. So what we're going to do is we are going to start designing that, and then we'll place it into the component a little bit later on. But I'm going to draw out this rectangle over to the right. I'm going to round out the corners a little bit. Now, like I mentioned in previous classes, the overall container on the video group is 16 pixels. If I were to set this container at 16 pixels as well, it doesn't look terrible, but it also looks a little bit off. So I'm just going to bring this back just a touch, maybe about 14. Something in that area there. Let's bring this out a touch. Let's go 16 and 16 and 16. All right, so that's looking pretty good. And I might want to just shift the color a little bit, or I can drop the opacity a touch as well. There's a lot of different ways we can do it. But the main thing that we want to focus on is inside of this container, we want to display the exercises. So on the simple level, we'll do something like, I'm just going to add some placeholder, or maybe we'll do, let's say, push-ups. Makes it a little bit larger so it's nice and visible. We'll go for more of a darker color. Oh, it's a little bit too large. And I might want to just bring this back a little bit. Instead of rounded, let's go for simple Museo Sans. Let's bring this down. Let's try 24. possibly. And then below this, we want a little bit of a description. So I'm going to switch it over to the fixed width, or the auto height, I should say. I'm going to bring this down maybe to 18. And since this is not a header, this is more of a body copy, I'm going to maybe drop the weight to about 700. Definitely want to bring this down a bit. And I think it's a little bit, it's not too bad, but I'm going to bring it down a little bit in size. Let me just fill this in just a little bit more. All right. So we have our header and we have our description. If I had more time, I would definitely fill this in so we have actual copy. But over to the left, I might want not only a number of which exercise this is. So in this case, we'll do something like this. Maybe we'll set like a nice gray with a bit of blue in there. And then maybe the number 1, right? That's a little bit too big, I think. And I'm not loving the style of this, so let's actually change the typeface. Maybe Avenir next, just so it's a little bit simpler. Something like that. I will group this number, and then right over here, what I would love to have is an animated Lottie animation that shows off maybe a push-up. And you can get these Lottie animations at lottiefiles.com. There's a bunch of websites that have Lottie files. But what I want to do is if I hop over to Finder, I have some Lottie animations right here. I think these were from Lottie files if I'm not mistaken. But I can drag these directly in. Now, they work very similar to images. So if you drag them on top of an existing container, it's going to mask it in place. But if you drag it on an empty area or over a text layer, you'll be able to pop it in there. Now these are pretty large and they're all vector based, which is great. I'll put this right about here. Now, very similar to videos, over to the right hand side, you can also choose how it plays back. So let's go for play automatically, and then I'm going to have this one loop as well. Cornell is asking, are you going to continue building this project during the next masterclass? I may, probably will. Yeah, considering I still have a bunch to, maybe. I do have another project planned, we'll see. But short answer is probably, but we will see. All right, so that looks pretty good. Perfect. Now, you're probably wondering, actually, I set this Lottie animation to play automatically, but when I launch the preview, it doesn't do anything, right? Now, at the moment of this masterclass, XD45 is available. When you launch a preview, it'll only play one interactive media if they're both present and set to play automatically. I believe as of the next version, XD46, that will be improved. It's either 46 or 47, something in that range. So now, if you want both of them to play, you have to trigger the second one. I'll show you that in just a moment. So we have one looking pretty good, and now I'm going to select all this information here, group it, call this exercise, and I can duplicate this down. Let's go for sit-ups. This will be number 2. And I believe I do have, is it this one possibly? Pop that in there. There we go. And then duplicate. I forget what this exercise is called, but let's just call it crunches. It's probably not crunches. Someone in the chat who's much more in tune with exercises than I am will definitely let me know what this thing is called. All right, so we have our 3 exercises in place, right? But of course, what we want is we want these exercises to show when the View Exercises button is clicked on, right? That's more like lunges. Ooh, lunges. That's probably it, Drew. Thank you. There we go. All right. So again, we want this to display when the View Exercises button is clicked on. Now, at the moment, this is a component, or at least it's an instance of a component, right? So what we're going to do is we want to select all this information. We're going to select our exercises and the container group, and I'm going to call this exercise. Now, there are a few ways we can do this. We can either add this as an overlay, which could be kind of interesting to show off, or we can include this inside of the component. Now, what I think could be fun, because we don't really use overlays as much anymore, let's actually go ahead and do that. So I'm going to move this onto this artboard here. I'm going to give it a little bit of breathing room. And then I want to make sure on this artboard that the fill is turned off. And what I can do now is in prototype mode, I can select this button that says View Exercises, and it's hard to see against the blue background, but there's a blue handle over to the right. And I can drag this handle over to this artboard here. And then within the Properties Inspector, I want to make sure that the type is set to Overlay. And this will allow me to actually move this exactly where I want it, right about here. And then I can also choose how it comes onto the artboard. Do I want it to simply dissolve, cut, which is none, or slide left, slide right, up, down, all that. So I might want it to slide left, just like that. And let's go for, whoops, was in place. Let's go for a nice ease. Let's just do ease out. We're not going to be able to see it at the beginning, so ease in probably doesn't make a difference, and then 0.4 seconds. So now if we press play at the top, we have our runner, right? And then View Exercises, and there it goes. Now, you're probably noticing that the video stopped, and that's one of the downsides of using an overlay at the moment. So let's try also the component way. So let me copy this. Let's delete this overlay for a moment. And what we want to make sure to do is edit the main component. So right over here is the main component. Here's our secondary state. Now what you're going to notice if I dive into here and simply paste it, we have some more explosion, right? Because we still have a stack enabled on this particular button, right? So we can either turn the stack off or, there's a bunch of different ways we can do it. But for now, let's turn the stack off. And what I would recommend is actually adding a separate group. In this particular case, adding a separate group inside and then having the stack on that. So that way, outside of that, you can put whatever you want. But inside of here, I'm going to paste this. Now, because I have the other, hold on, turn the stack off here too. Because I have the other button visible, we're seeing it both there. Let me delete that for now. So I'm going to start by pasting this over here to the right. Just like that. Perfect. And then I might want one more state where it actually comes into view. And as Cody says, we have no streams next week. And we also have Kyle T. Webster coming up in just a few moments. Exercises. And then from here, I'm going to dive in and bring this on over to the left. Secondary, default. Perfect. Okay, so one more time, I'm going to duplicate that over, switch over to secondary. And now we can wire this up. So in prototype mode, I'm going to select the button. And I'm going to click on the handle. And in this case, instead of dragging to a separate artboard, we're simply going to choose a different state, which is, I want to do transition and exercise state. Let's do an ease out like we did before, and perfect. And just to wrap things up, I'm also going to go to the exercise state. And ideally I would have like a close button, but for now we'll just click on this and go to our secondary state. And now, if all went well, we should be able to launch the preview. We have our runner, and now we can press on View Exercises. The state comes out, and nothing plays, right? And that's because I forgot to set my animations to play automatically. You gotta check these things before you launch your prototypes. All right, one more time. I promise this will work this time. Runner, doing its thing, right? And then, view. And Lottie animations play back beautifully. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, is you can have a video and several Lottie animations playing at the same time, as long as the other is triggered after the artboard loads. So in this case, we had the runner, and then I triggered the state with the Lottie animations, and those played back beautifully. But as of either XD46 or 47, you'll be able to play back video and Lottie animations at the same time once an artboard loads. So definitely stay tuned for that. But that's going to wrap things up for today. Big thank you to everyone who has tuned in to Masterclass number 74. Chris and Umacorn, Cornell, Laura, the Adongo, great name, Megan, Hamza. Great to see you all. Stick around. Kyle T. Webster's coming up in just a few minutes, and I will see you all not next week, but the week after that. Thanks, everyone.